Another really helpful thing is for people to text and say, hey, I know your family's going through this. I love you. I'm sending prayers. Put my name on the list. Whatever list it is for in the future, if you need something, I volunteer. I'm here. And so just knowing that you have a list of people who have signed up for whatever, rides to the hospital, rides to doctor's appointments, picking people up from the airport, getting groceries, like having sort of a list of people, say via either text or email, that if there's a request can be sent out to. And I actually think it's better not to send it out to necessarily one person, because then sometimes there's that emotional exchange of like, oh, what if they say no? And then the person receiving it on the other end is like, I feel so bad, I can't say no, right? But if you have a list of say 5 or 10 people, if you send it out and you say, please let me know if this is something you can do. I'll respond and make plans to the person who responds first. If you don't hear from me, I thank you so much. It just means we found someone else. Like, done, done, done.
Solidarity Sister. Solidarity Sister. Some people exude light wherever they go. Allison Wyman of the Cozy Caregiver Cafe is one of those people, and I am so grateful to have her as a friend. Allison is a family caregiving attorney, consultant, and coach. She has all of the practical and technical knowledge and a heart with the capacity to hold tremendous space for people really going through it. Caregiving is hard, y'all, and she's been there for it as a 2-time cancer caregiver to both her father and her mother. I'm so excited to have her on the podcast to give us some ideas about how to prepare for caregiving and how to use community support during the midst of a caregiving season. I feel like we only scratched the surface of what Allison has to offer in this area. So I hope you'll connect with her in the show notes to catch her upcoming free masterclass on either the 17th, the 22nd, or the 25th. Also, Allison's digital course, How Your Family Wins in Caregiving, launches this month. There's a link to that in the show notes as well. And Allison has a generous offer for our listeners. Use code SISTERS, SISTERS, to save 25%, which is a very significant savings. Course registration closes on January 25th, so put that date in your phone now to remind you to sign up before the deadline. Allison, I'm so glad to be able to connect with you here on another episode of Solidarity Sister. And Allison, tell me how you are doing today for real.
Oh gosh, today I'm actually doing really, really well. Thank you. It's cold here in New York City, but I don't know if this happens to other people, but sometimes parts of my morning are calibrated by the peacefulness of my evening the day before. And we just had a very peaceful evening last night. So I do feel like I'm sort of sliding into this morning, definitely with a bump there.
Oh, I think that you make such a good point, because there are definitely times when I've had such a rough night, and then it really does like bleed into the morning and affect the rest of the day. And if you have a good evening and a good bedtime kind of set down, it's peaceful, you wake up. Often
Absolutely.
uh,
Absolutely.
hard to do when you have kids and all the things that they have going on, but sometimes the stars align. So, right?
And we have a 2.5-year-old son. I'm very thankful for him. And he is in a bit of a sleep regression. And so he has been waking up in the threes, so around the 3 a.m.s. And so he did wake up in the ones around 1 a.m., but then he went back to sleep. So maybe that's another reason because he slept. So mama got to sleep a little bit more.
A huge difference. So tell me, what are you listening to lately? Whether podcasts, music, audiobooks, what's in your ear?
My goodness. Well, the honest truth of it is I've been working. I love to do this in December on a lot of mindset and mentality work. I love doing this in December whenever I'm getting ready for a new year in January. So I've been working on a number of different programs, so audio programs that I can do just as I'm doing anything else around the house. I think Tony Robbins calls it net time, no extra time. And so I've been listening to a lot of different peacefulness programs, mindfulness programs, a lot of intention setting programs. So I'm feeling very grateful for that.
Oh, I love that. I think I'm already learning. We're just a few minutes in here, and I am realizing that I have been listening to a lot of like cozy murder mystery type series audiobooks. And I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and I am not feeling peaceful. And I wonder
Mm,
if it's a connection. So
Absolutely. I mean, who knows? But
I,
I do I do have to say that as a family around the holidays, so we don't own a TV. We live in New York City, uh, we have what feels like a gigantic place in the city, but it's probably a pretty small place for anywhere else. And we don't have a TV, but we have been watching on our laptops Hallmark Christmas movies. So sometimes in the evenings we'll put on a Hallmark Christmas movie, and typically, what happens is my son and myself will fall asleep to that, and my husband will then shut it off. So,
I love that you're all together. And I've not listened to or watched as many Hallmark movies this year as usual. Usually that's like my one time of year where I do watch screens. I'm not a big TV watcher. I'm not a big movie watcher, but usually like it starts to hit November and I'm like, okay, it's Hallmark movie time.
well,
I
I do have to tell you that I am a huge Hallmark movie fan, and I mean, I nerd out on it. It's not just the way it makes you feel, which is obviously wonderful and lovely, but I actually love how Hallmark brings in, I think they very artfully bring in difficult subjects, but in a gentle way. And so one of the things that I've actually started doing is jotting down when I'm watching a movie how some sort of family caregiving issue is brought in, and I'm going to do case studies on it.
That's awesome. I have friends that claim there's only one Hallmark movie plot, but I have identified at least five.
No,
So
there are a lot.
there's
And
only more than one going on.
And I have to tell you, Kristen, that I've been doing this for years and years, and I would say that there's normally a clear winner new movie for the year. And it's not like I want everybody to win and everything to win. That's the Hallmark way. But there's normally one movie that's a standout, a really great movie. And the season isn't over yet, but I think I have it if you want to know.
I would love to know.
Okay, so if you could only watch one Hallmark movie, and I have high standards, so this has a genuinely good plot, and that when my husband watched it, he was like, that was a good movie. Like he loved it. It's My Norwegian Holiday.
Okay.
And I have to tell people that give it past the first 10 minutes. I remember in the first 10 minutes, I very much was thinking, oh no, I don't think I'm going to like this. But then I have rewatched it over and over and had it playing in the background. That's how much I've loved it. And the funny thing, Kristen, is that is also every best friend, like best friend, sister, or brother I've met in my life has started that way too. My initial impression of them was like, what is happening? And then they become my dearest best friends. And I normally don't have impressions of people like that. I go out of my way to try to be not judgmental. So if someone's doing something different, I'll just be like, you do you. That's cool. But on the times that I've been pinged of like, what is this person doing? Those are the people that end up becoming my best friend.
So interesting. I wonder if it's like triggering some little something that actually like a part of you that really wants to be connected, but at first it's uncomfortable. Like,
Absolutely.
oh, and then you're like, actually, okay, My Norwegian Holiday. Is that what you said it was?
My Norwegian Holiday. It is the sweetest, best, most wonderful movie.
All right, I will be looking that one up because I need some more. Last year we watched one that was so bad. It was the worst one that I've ever seen. And I don't remember because I call them Hallmark movies, but sometimes they're like on different networks. They're not all,
Ah,
I watched the different networks also.
yes,
They're Hallmark style movies. Sometimes they're actual Hallmark. Sometimes they're like Great
yes.
American Family or Up TV or whatever version. But it was one about this snowman who became a person. It was so bad. The plot was bad. Like the whole thing, it was so bad.
That's amazing that that was the plot and that you guys still said yes as a family. You
We
were
watched the whole thing. We were like, oh my gosh, that was so
And two,
It
I
was all
do have
funny.
to admit, I'm a bit of a purist. I know that there are other great networks and channels, and I have to stick to Hallmark. That has been my MO because I have found that the quality has waned a little bit, and I don't like to watch things that aren't great. So,
Gotcha. That's okay. That's okay.
yeah.
You for you. So I know you have built this beautiful community with the cozy caregiver community that has come out of some difficult times in your life. And I would love to know more about the community that you're building, what you're offering to people, and what life experiences have kind of led you down this path. Because this isn't really like you aren't, your profession is not to be a caregiver, right? Your profession is as an attorney. So this is something that's really a passion project and that's coming straight from your heart.
Oh, thank you, Kristen. That it means so much to me that you feel that you, who is so loving and just feel that way. So one, like, thank you for giving me that gift. And two, there are two moments in my life that I wish that I could go back and change. And there are only two moments in my life
And that's
that I
pretty good,
truly
actually,
regret.
because I think I would change a lot more than two. So,
Well, I mean, for me, because I very much believe if you change the past, you change the future because it's all connected. And so maybe I shouldn't even say change. There are really only 2 minutes of my 2 moments of my past that haunt me. And they have been the moments that have continued to drive me. And you're right, the ways that they've driven me in the family caregiving field haven't always been strictly law legal drafting, legal research based because family caregiving, which is the field that I'm in, spans the entire emotional and life spectrum. And so, how could we ever expect that there's only one channel into that? And you have to stay within this one realm when we're literally talking about life and death. So, the Cozy Caregiver Cafe is the place that I wish I had had when I was a family caregiver caring for my dad, who was diagnosed with cancer and died in 2006, 6 months before my wedding. And then in 2012, when my mom was diagnosed with cancer, and I was 3 weeks into my very first job out of law school. And so the Cozy Caregiver Cafe, I dream that it will come in and wrap around these people. And so that the moment you become a family caregiver, yes, it is terrible in so many ways, but guess what? There's something great about it. Because you now get to be at the Cozy Caregiver Cafe, and maybe you've kind of been hanging around, not really getting what it is. But now you're like, oh, I get it. This is where I belong. This is where my people are. This is where my information is. And I know that Allison's going to be by my side every day. That's kind of what I wish I had had when I was a caregiver. And so that's what I'm trying to build. And you're absolutely right, Kristen, that it came out of moments of pain. And the two moments that haunt me that have really driven my professional life now and my personal life have been when my dad was diagnosed with cancer. He was in a room full of about probably 10 or 15 doctors. We were at a big hospital, Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston. He had been in the hospital for 2 weeks and no one knew what was going on. And that's a really long time. And so finally, he had a meeting with all of his doctors there because they had all been sharing information and using their specialties, and they called it a tumor board. And so they came in and they basically said, you have cancer and it's really bad. And then there was this probably 10 or 15-second period when he had to leave that room and he had to walk over to me and my mom and tell us this news. And one of the things, Kristen, that I have thought about over and over again in my life is what could I have done or helped him do that would have made that 10 or 15-second walk any better? And one of the things I've thought about is having his affairs in order, having his estate in order, having his finances in order. So he could say, I'm all set there. If I die, my family will be taken care of. And now I can just divert all of my energy and put all of my energy onto living or onto doing whatever I can to live the longest and the best life that I can. He didn't have that in order, Kristen. He died without a will. He died with an estate and a small business that was a mess. He died and left so much money on the table that my family missed out on because of administrative things that had he known or had I known, had we as a family had systems in place, we wouldn't have left, we wouldn't have missed. And I mean life-changing amounts of money. And so one of the things that I've done is not only have I become a family caregiving attorney as a result of this, and I help people plan their estates. I also help adult children think about what's going to be required of them and what should be in place for their aging parents. But I've also created this course, which is launching in January 2024, called How Your Family Wins in Caregiving. And basically, what this course does is it provides the education and the assessments that I think are important to give the confidence for, say, an adult child to then finally have the courage to hold the conversations with their family members that need to be held. And these are the practical conversations. These are also the sentimental conversations. They're the legacy conversations. To me, they're the life-changing conversations, the ones that you wish that you had held after somebody passes and you know that you can't anymore. I'm really excited about this course. I'm so grateful to be in this field. And every time I work with a family and I meet with a family, I just feel so thankful to God that this has been my calling. And I didn't know that it was my calling when it was happening to me. My life was pretty messy during caregiving and after caregiving, especially professionally. I'm really hoping that with the work that I'm doing now, I can just make it less painful for families. I can reduce regret and I can reduce the risk of leaving money on the table. I can help people feel more confident and prepared. I can give families the space and the opportunity to have the conversations they want to have. And I can help the caregiver after caregiving ends feel like a full person so that they can grieve and then they can continue to grow.
Oh, I love this. There are so many practical pieces that go into caregiving and family planning for your estate and for all those kinds of things. And dare I admit, we don't have a will, and my husband is an attorney. So I think that it's like the cobbler's, children have no shoes. We know the things to do, but haven't prioritized them. And you'd think that we would, but I know my parents did a good job of this, but I didn't know how they did it. Like they've had in trust and multiple trusts, I think, and all different things that have been going on for many years. And I will say, as my parents are getting older, and my mom is actually in a memory care facility and she can't walk anymore. She really only has use of one of her hands. Communication is a real struggle. We're seeing the aging. I am grateful that my parents were in a position to take care of those things. And I haven't really had to think about them. Financially, that hasn't been a huge issue in our family. And there's still so much. There's still so much that like I feel, removed from them because they live in California, I live in Utah, and I still have a large family at home. There are still so many pieces, and I'm not even having to do the practical part. But if we had to also be doing that and also be talking about like, how are we paying for her to be in this facility, which is my dad kept her home so much longer than I think almost anyone would. Like he really injured his back. Like he was really did not want her to have to leave. And I feel that like he really stepped up tremendously. But there is a point where someone, she needs two people to help with a lot of things. And there's a point which one person alone in their 80s can only do so much. I'm like, Dad, I don't even think I could do it. And I'm younger than you are. You've done so much. And so I think you are bringing such a gift by pulling this course together. So tell me more so I understand this course. So you're going to get practical pieces that are talking about like the financial planning aspect and or the wills aspect, those kinds of pieces. But then also are there some emotional support pieces or what does this look like if you're signing up for this course? Is it a live course? Is it a video recorded course? Are we having is there a place for people to ask questions as they come through, like a little bit of coaching, so to speak, that comes along? I'd love to understand more about this because it sounds so awesome, but I want to just know what it looks like.
Absolutely. Well, and thank you for the question. Administratively, it is going to be live, as in I am going to be training people live. And at the end of each session, I will also be there for question and answer and group coaching. So I don't want Kristen to be in a situation where people just learn information. They're like, oh, yeah, that's useful. I really want people to implement. And implement here means holding these conversations with their family members. And so it's my goal with the structure of the program that they learn from me, and then that week, they hold a short call with their family member and they ask the scripted questions that I provide. And then, if they have questions about the information provided, which they've written down, because even just having that foundation is important, then they can come back the following week at the Q&A and we can discuss it. And so I'm really trying to be as available as possible, not only in the teaching and the questions that come up with the teaching, but also in the follow up of like, what does this actually mean? Or my family member ended up saying this, like, I don't even know what to do or where to go. I do feel like there is coaching that can help people sort of direct the conversation or redirect the dialogue in a helpful way. So, yes, I am going to be there as a support, as a resource. People will also have access to me via email. They can email me questions and then I will address those during the live session. And it's going to be live weekly sessions for 8 weeks. So that is the goal. In terms of the content, whenever I talk to people, some of them will say, and I get this, they'll say, I want a caregiving plan. I'm like, hey, that's great. You're thinking way ahead of it. I love it. I want to make one little tweak though, because a plan, right, says I'm going to go from here to here to here to here. But what happens if something changes? And we know that life changes. We think someone's living here and then they move there. And like, I don't want your plan to fall apart. So instead, what I want to give you is a caregiving map. So, regardless of where your family lands in a caregiving situation, you recognize the terrain enough that you know where you are and you know the things that you need to do first. And so, the caregiving map itself, Kristen, is going to be the legal education and the practical considerations about caregiving. All caregiving issues that I've seen in my personal and professional life, and I've been doing this for now nearly 20 years, falls into about 5 different buckets. That's it. So we may feel like, oh, there are so many things to think about, and there are. Don't get me wrong, there is a litany of things we need to think about. However, I think it becomes less overwhelming if you say, oh, that's in this bucket. And we're just going to say that that bucket's its own little country, right? So, like, it's not, oh, here are all of these 100 things I need to think about. It's here's one country, and like, let's just start there because we've identified that this is a priority area for us. So, we have the map, which I like to think of as like the terrestrial terrain. So, it's really the terrain of caregiving. I also want people to know what to do when their map fails them. And I call that the celestial navigation. In caregiving, if you don't know what to do, if you get to a place where you are so either overwhelmed or misunderstanding or confused and you need to make decisions or you feel like you should be doing more, I think people need to look to the stars. And in stars here, it is their family stories and their family legacy and their faith. So I want people to recognize that even if you are the best explorer in the whole world and you have, understood this map back and forth, there are going to be times when it's going to be too dark to truly see the terrain. And at that time, I want people to have access to family stories that can help them understand what to do next or feel a little less hurt. And then lastly, and I would say arguably this is the most important, I want people to have their compass. And their compass is their self-assessment and their boundary setting of what it is they can give when it comes to being a caregiver and what is non-negotiable. I say this as somebody who the time that I became a primary caregiver, completely left my job, moved back to my mom's house and stayed there for a year. I'm really fortunate that I had a husband who could support me. We had just purchased a home on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. He was able through his work to continue to pay the mortgage. I mean, I was really, really fortunate, but I didn't have the foresight and the planning that I really should have. And now that we have a 2.5-year-old, I would need to have. And so, like you talked about, if you were financially responsible for your parents now, what I find is that the time to set your budget about what your family can afford to pay without putting other issues and financial issues of your family at risk is not at a time of crisis, right? Because when someone's sick or when someone needs something, that's not when we want to say, well, we've really been saving up in this college fund and we really are committed to putting in X amount a month. So it's going to be like, moms on the street, or we're putting in $500 a month to this college fund. Like, no, I don't want anyone to feel like those are the choices they have to make. And so I think that if we're able to move some of this self assessment, self awareness, and decision making upstream, people can feel confident saying, oh, I've set a boundary there. I wish I could give more, but I can't without putting my family at risk. So this is what I can offer. The one thing, Kristen, I just want to share is that when it comes to the celestial navigation, the legacy, one story about my dad is that when he started to lose consciousness, and I don't know if you or other people have been with somebody as they've passed or if, as they've been nearing death, but when he started to lose consciousness or drift in and out of this life, he was returning to the days when he was a Navy man and he was on the ship with some of his best friends. And had I not known, because of conversations we had, how important those days were to him, I think I would have been almost a little alarmed. Like, why is he going onto this boat? And why isn't he thinking about me and my mom? Like, is something wrong? Is he having a fear of water? Why is it that he keeps returning to the ship and, to the submarine and doing things? But I knew that those were some of his best moments in his life. And so there was such a comfort there that every time he drifted out of the consciousness of this life and he would start talking seemingly nonsensically about what was happening, in the submarine or on the ship, I felt peace. And I said, okay, Allison, this is where you can just go and be with him, relive some of those best memories, and also knowing that this probably means he's going to go home soon.
Oh, I love that. And I think that that is important. I was with my grandpa when he died, and I was very close to him. Unfortunately, the last time he had been really actually awake was as I was on the plane to visit. And we had 5 young children and lived in Chicago, and he was in the Bay Area. But I got to then stay with him and be with him and read all these cards that people had sent to him and just kind of sit with him and be there when he died. I was holding his hand. But I know there were some kind of key indicators that people around him were able to see. And sometimes around death, I think there are more supernatural things that we kind of see that there is something more that comes next. In his case, he was in the same care home that my grandmother had passed away in before that, which had been like a mile and a half from their house. And it was two homes side by side that had been converted into these really sweet, like living centers. And the caregivers were phenomenal and really loved those patients. And it was more of like living in a home as opposed to living in a facility. It was a really great place to be. And one of them had been watching him on the monitors, because they had monitors during the night and stuff. And during the day, they just kind of were watching when the patients were in their rooms to make sure the residents that they were safe. And she had also been a caregiver for my grandmother. And she saw my grandmother come and put her arm around my grandpa a week before he passed away. And I'm sure that sounds crazy to some people, but like, I really believe it. I do. And I do think she was coming for him. And she kind of told the family, and we were able to talk to the hospice care worker. And I've been following a caregiving or a hospice nurse named Nurse Hadley. I don't know if you've seen her. She makes a lot of like Instagram reels and stuff. And she talks about the different experiences that she's had as a hospice nurse. And she's more recently written a book called The In Between. And it talks about different patients she's had. And I've been able to listen to that one. It's really phenomenal. But I think that just being able to be more aware of some of these things that are common, and like as Nurse Hadley was talking about it, that whether people are religious or not, or have faith or not, it's actually quite common for them to be seeing loved ones. It's not an experience that necessarily everyone sees and reports, but it is common. And it is common to go back and relive these other memories. It's also common to kind of have like a last burst of energy that seems, like things are, oh my gosh, it's a miraculous recovery, but it's really a last burst of energy before they pass away. And I think just the more knowledge that we have about these kinds of things, then it's like you being with your dad in those last minutes, instead of being like, oh my gosh, my dad is crazy. No, this is like a normal part of letting go of this life. This is a normal way of processing the end of life. And then there's more peace in that moment because you're not so concerned about like, oh my gosh, they're hallucinating. They're seeing their sister. They're seeing their father. They're seeing, like, no, actually, this is just part of the human experience. And when you have more knowledge, it is easier to be in the moment and not be panicking. It
Mm.
still might be a little bit uncomfortable, for some people,
Mm-hmm.
some of these things that happen. But I think it's phenomenal to give people just that knowledge, both the more practical knowledge that is more tied up in the finances and all of that kind of a piece, but then also just a knowledge about what it's like to be a caregiver, what it's like to be with someone when they are passing away, what the grief is like. Is that something you also were looking at, like the processing of grief, or is that kind of one of those things that kind of maybe goes out of the wheelhouse of what you're covering here?
So the course itself, the how your family wins in caregiving, doesn't deal with processing grief. With that said, former family caregivers, which is just a name I've given people who are no longer caregivers but have been, are so near and dear to my heart that I do coaching for them as well. There really isn't coaching out there, Kristen. I mean, we can talk about this. There's a lot of coaching for mamas during pregnancy, but maybe not so much, right, for mamas after they give birth. I mean, it's a little bit like that, except I think it's much harder and emotionally, potentially more devastating in the caregiving world. And so I really struggled finding my place after caregiving, not during, but after caregiving. And so I have a lot of love for former caregivers and I do offer support to them, but it is separate from the course. So thank you. Thank you for clarifying that.
That's good to know that that's something that you offer, because I think that is a place where there isn't enough support. And like I look at my mom, who my parents lived 20 minutes away from my grandparents, and she used to call my grandpa when he was living alone. And even before that, like every night at 9 o'clock was kind of their thing. And that was always like a 24-hour check. And she visited quite frequently and was driving up there. But if he didn't answer the phone, she was driving up. Like she was going to make sure. And a couple of times that happened and the phone had been left off the hook, because this was like before cell phones were really as much of a thing. And so when both of my grandparents had passed away, 9 o'clock came every day and there was no one to call. And there's an emptiness there. And I look at my dad now, who is at this facility. Every day he goes at lunch and he feeds her because she struggles to have use of one of her hands. And she's like, how does she cut food? And so she can feed herself with the one hand, but needs help making sure all the food is there. So he's there for lunch, he's there for dinner. And I know it's hard and it's lonely to come home to a house, but when she's gone, then what? Because his whole life revolves around showing up for her every day, day in and day out. he has driven hundreds of times to be there, because sometimes he even goes 3 times in a day. So he'll go and then be gone for a little bit, come back, and like, you know. And so caregiving becomes such a huge part of your life. So many hours of your day, physically, mentally, that's what you're doing. When that person passes away, there's a big hole. And what do I do now?
Absolutely. And I think what's also can be hard, Kristen, and I love, thank you for sharing that about your family, is that what feels natural is the love that you were providing, but it's also really painful, right? So, like, the thing that feels the most natural is also this heartbreaking pain thing. And so now you're not only sitting in grief because someone that you loved is gone, but the only way you know to connect sort of to that person in the experiences you've just had is through this thing that you were doing out of love. And I'm sure you found, like, people have found joy in it, and but it's also really painful, right? And so that was a large part of why I struggled, is because I didn't know how to not be it, how to not connect to pain, because I wanted to still feel close to the things that felt familiar. But what felt familiar was actually pain. And that's not necessarily a way to move on with your life and grow and show up for your family. And I say this, Kristen, and the reason why I care so much, not only about former caregivers and current caregivers, but why I want what I call future caregivers, people who will be stepping into the role or who have just stepped into the role, why I want them to win and I want everyone to win, is because it was not when I was caregiving for my dad, not when he died, not when my husband deployed to Afghanistan, not when my mom was diagnosed, and not when she got better. It was after all that that I had suicidal ideations. And I come from a world where I'm almost too much, too happy, too cheerful, too naturally baseline, just joyful for people that sometimes, like, they don't like me because of it. I had everything going for me, every single thing imaginable going for me. And so if I could get to that point, I just feel so concerned, and I don't want other people to have to go there or land there, unnecessarily. And so the way to avoid that when possible is by having clear boundaries, having a clear understanding of your role, feeling like you have agency over your life and you're not just a supporting player in someone else's life that's quite chaotic. Recognizing the things that you can control and the things that you can't, and really knowing how to give grace to yourself. And so that's really what I'm trying to do with my course and what I'm trying to do with just the Cozy Caregiver Cafe community.
I love that. And thank you for sharing that so vulnerably, because, from the time that I've known you, I would never expect that. But I've been reminded multiple times that you never know what people are hiding. So, what do you think that the people around you, like for those of us who are listening who don't have someone we're caregiving for, but we have people we love that are caregivers, what did people do that was helpful to you? What did people do that made it worse? Like, what are the things that we can do to better support those caregivers who have heavy burdens?
Ah, that's such a beautiful question. One, just even asking that question helps, not just me, but every single person, because there's an energy to that question, and that that question itself helps. I think, though, that there has to be more awareness and discussion around the fact that once you are a caregiver and you're going through it, and then it's over and you're a former caregiver, you are a different person. And things in your life that used to fit don't fit anymore. And that can be really scary. And so the job that you had, or the way that you were parenting, or the relationships, maybe including your marriage, or, the way that you were showing up for people, all of that is changing and has changed. And so I think that one of the greatest gifts people can give is just space and freshness and a non-judgmental attitude towards a new beginning. So it's not after caregiving, I'm Allison back in my old life. It's after caregiving, I'm Allison, but I'm blooming in a new way. And one of the greatest gifts that we had was that after my mom was done, after she, thankfully had survived and was thriving and no longer had cancer in her body, my husband, right that year, started business school. And so we were able to meet all of these amazing new friends who didn't know me from before. And this isn't to say that the friends who didn't know me, who knew me from before, weren't helpful, but I think just being in an environment where nobody had preconceived notions about who I was, or, you know, that was really, really lovely. And I think as a result, because I was so just vulnerably myself and accepted because people didn't know me any other way, those relationships have really remained um, steadfast. And those people, those friends, have become family. In business school, we met people who are now our son's godpapas or successor godparents. We've met the person that, when I had some health, when my son had to go through surgery, she's one of the first people that I called. I mean, like truly people that have had meaningful moments and meaningful relationships and experiences in our lives. I think it was in a sense because my heart, I was so spent and my heart was so open. I didn't have a mask on anymore. I couldn't do that. And these people accepted me for who I was.
I love that. I love that. And I see what you're saying because there are times where we kind of need to reinvent ourselves, like to pull a Madonna page, not that I'm but where we have to just kind of have a new season and be in a different place because our life experiences are such that we just need to go a new direction. And sometimes it can be hard for the people around us to let us grow. The people that have known us the longest. I know I am still the baby sister in my family, and I am 45 and I have 8 children. But like, I am the baby sister, and my little brother, my younger brother, he asked us, I don't know, sometime in his 30s, he said, "Do you think you could stop calling me your little brother and call me your younger brother instead?" And I was like, I will work on that. But he is a grown up, but there's a part of me that still sees him, and he's a very successful grown up. He's a great husband and father and provider and really good at his job and what he does, and he's valued in the business world, but like he's still my baby brother. And so I think that's a good reminder for us, for these people that we've known, whether they're our family members or just those really longtime friends, to give them the space to continue to reinvent as many times as they need to and be able to step back and be willing to have fresh eyes, because people actually can and do change. It's a cop out when people are like, "Oh, that's just how I am." Like, yes and no. There are things in our wiring that time blindness is always going to be an issue for me. I have ADHD. I don't experience time the way normal people do, or neurotypical, or whatever the fancy words are. Like if someone's colorblind, they're not going to suddenly be able to see color, even if they work at it. But you can find coping strategies. I am more on time now than I used to be for things. But it's not because I've developed a sense of time. That I just don't feel time in my body. I don't. But I've learned how to use alarms in a better way. And I've learned how to use coping strategies. So we can change. We can grow in small ways and in big ways. And we do other people a service when we allow them to change and we accept this new version of them, which in some ways is going to be better. In a lot of ways, it's going to be better, but it's going to be different. And that just needs to be okay. So I think that's really good. What about just like the tangible things? Like, did people bring meals to you? Did they offer to get groceries for you or to run errands? Was that helpful, or was it actually not helpful? Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. How did people show up in those very practical step-by-step ways during that time?
So during caregiving, people definitely brought meals, and it was always really helpful. As a very practical tip, if you bring a meal to somebody, please bring it in something that that person does not have to return to you. Because I mean, literally, and if anybody brought me anything, even if it wasn't in Tupperware or tinfoil, she's like, they're not getting this back. I can't manage, like that was too much to manage. I would also say that have an understanding and that the fact that you're bringing a meal doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to go in the house. I think actually the best system is I have a meal, it's going to be on your front porch. I'll tell you what time I'm dropping it off because I want to make sure it's okay. And like, if there's any issue, please let me know. That sort of text is so great because if people feel like they need to come into the home or explain some sort of directions, it can become really overwhelming. I have talked to so many caregivers, and all of them have said it's when the people would leave the meals on my front porch. And I was just like, thank you, because I receive that, but I also don't have to talk to you right now. I don't have to have small talk. I don't have to be dressed. I can just sort of receive what you're giving me, receive that benefit without expending anything that I might not have to expend.
We often, when we take a meal to a family, we always take disposables, and then I always put in paper plates and plastic
Oh
utensils.
gosh, you are a godsend.
And
Yes,
like
that
a
is
out thing. And then in my mind, there are no dishes. And if they really want to use their own silverware and they want to wash it or their own plates, like go for it. I know I'm not saving the environment here, but to me, it's this way of being like, everything should be able to be thrown away. I shouldn't have to have any work come out of this if at all
That's
possible.
a godsend. I mean, absolutely. I almost liken it to when someone has a new baby and somebody gives them a present, which is so nice, but it has like very specific hand washing instructions or something. It's just like, I so appreciate this. It comes from a good place. I just can't. Like, this is going to get machine washed. You know what I mean? And I only have one child. I can only imagine, Kristen. So I would say, from a practical perspective, if you're asking for tips when someone is caregiving, yes, definitely give without the expectation that you're going to see that person. I would say that another really helpful thing is for people to text, so not call or email, but for people to text and say, hey, I know your family's going through this. I love you. I'm sending prayers. Put my name on the list. Whatever list it is for in the future, if you need something, like I volunteer, I'm here. Because sometimes what happens is there's a mismatch between when people are offering or what they're offering and what's actually needed. And I think seasoned caregivers are very good at saying, like, yeah, I need you to mow my lawn. Will you do that? And they're okay with that. But sometimes people don't feel comfortable asking. And so just knowing that you have a list of people who have signed up for whatever, rides to the hospital, rides to doctor's appointments, picking people up from the airport, getting groceries, like, the person that volunteers can always say no. They can always say, "Oh, I'm too busy." But having sort of a list of people say via either text or email that if there's a request can be sent out to. And I actually think it's better not to send it out to necessarily one person because then sometimes there's that emotional exchange of like, "Oh, what if they say no?" And then the person receiving it on the other end is like, "Oh my gosh, I feel so bad. I can't say no," right? But if you have a list of say 5 or 10 people, if you're really blessed and you have that many people in your life, you send it out and you say, please let me know if this is something you can do. I'll respond and make plans to the person who, responds first. If you don't hear from me, I thank you so much. It just means we found someone else. Like, done, done, done.
Oh, I love this. I think there's some great practical tips in here. Number one, when people say, let me know if I can do anything as a caregiver, a good answer would be, I keep a running list of people I can reach out to when a need arises. Can I add you to that text list?
Absolutely.
And that gives you a tangible thing because I think a lot of times caregivers are really too overwhelmed in that moment when someone says, hey, what can I do for you today? And they're like, I don't even know. Like, I don't even know what day we're on. Right. Like,
Hmm.
that's too much mental energy. But then one day the thought comes, I wish I had someone to mow the lawn. But then they're like, it takes too much energy to then decide, well, who do I think that might be willing to mow a lawn? Or like, what? It's just that delegation, I think, requires a lot of emotional labor. And
Hmm.
so if the people who are volunteering can be on a list, and then the caregiver themselves can say to the 5 to 15 people, I need my lawn mowed anytime on Thursday. Is anyone available or know someone who is? first one to respond, I'll work with them. Thank you so much. That would be a beautiful way for us to be able to show up for each other in community in ways that are actually meaningful and helpful, instead of this, let me know if there's anything I can do. And then the caregiver's like never going to let anyone know because it just all feels too hard. And I like what you talked about. When it goes to a group, it's a different energy and vulnerability level than it is if it's you to this one person, because like, then what if they say no? It's messier. But when there's like a group and there's that community feel, and you're more likely to have someone who's going to respond too, if you're asking 10 people, because maybe not all of them are available that day, but they would like to be. And that, I think that's such a great practical tip. I always
Thank you.
appreciate learning these things because I feel like so many of us, when we're struggling, we don't know how to ask for help or what to do. And so many of us, when we see someone, whether it's a coworker, a neighbor, a friend that is struggling, we also don't know what to do. So then, like, we just need instruction on how to be a better member of the community. And that is really what I want this podcast to do, is to help people see, okay, here are some things you can do. And then you feel more empowered. And then you connect, because I think people inherently want to connect. They really do. They don't always know how. Sometimes they do it poorly. Sometimes they act out because they're so frustrated by not knowing how. But inherently, they do want to connect in meaningful ways. Everybody wants to be seen.
Absolutely. And at
Together.
one, I just completely agree with everything you said. And Kristen, the other thing that I want to add is yes, there are lots of wonderful things that community members around this family and around the caregiver can do. I also think, and I say this as often as I can, that the moment that person becomes a caregiver, and I actually think before they become a caregiver, they need to create their own board of advisors, two or three people that they trust in their life, and they say, listen, I'm either going to go through this or I'm going through this. It's going to be hard. I'm going to need somebody to help guide me because I'm going to get off track. I trust you. I know you have my best interests at heart. Would it be okay if you checked in on me maybe every 2 weeks, or a phone call every 3 weeks, a text every week, whatever the frequency is, and ask how I'm doing? Because if you do that, you will open the door, if I'm having a bad day, for me to say, oh, I actually really, really do need to talk to somebody. And here, just out of the blue, is this angel who I trust, who's willing to talk to me. So I love the idea of community members doing things, but I also love the idea of the caregiver creating their board of advisors beforehand. And the other thing that I always want all caregivers to do is you pick a small number of people, and then you share updates and information about what's going on in your family or what's going on with the person you're caring for. And not to everybody, but just to the people where it really matters most. Because what I've found is that when the caregiver feels really swamped and doesn't know what to do and doesn't know where to turn, there have been layer upon layer upon layer of medical or home or practical issues that have surfaced. And so when I've been in that situation, what happens is it's like, I need help, but oh my gosh, thinking about explaining this to somebody else is
Mm.
so exhausting. I literally can't do that. So I just have to figure this out myself. That's not a healthy place to be. But if there's a few people that you've taken with you on this journey, and again, if it's, say you have three people who are part of your board advisors, you could send out one email to all three of them, with updates on a periodic basis. It's not like you have to be having these three different conversations. Then they're like, oh yeah, I remember this infection happened the last time. And so that's why you're worried about an infection this time. Like, I get that. I'm level
Contact.
setting here with you. Let's start, instead of you having to explain everything that happened that's led to your anxiety, so that by the time you get to the thing that you really need help, you don't have any energy left to problem solve.
Oh, I think that's fantastic. I've been part of a few Facebook groups too that might have more than 3 people, that might have like 100 people or something, that are kind of getting the updates
Mhm.
for someone when there have been a lot of medical issues, or, a cancer journey or whatever. So that I think it does help to be able to just say, hey, we're going to give this one update and be able to put it out there. And when you take people on the journey with you, they have the context. And so you're not starting from square one when you're trying to explain what's going on. So I think these are some great, like just practical, tangible things that you're bringing up. And I so appreciate that. Where can people go to learn more about you?
Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you, Kristen. Well, I'm on Instagram at Cozy Caregiver Cafe. I also have a podcast, the Cozy Caregiver Cafe, and that's on Apple and Spotify. And so it's really always important that I'm putting out a lot of valuable free content because it's so tough being a caregiver, and I want people to have all the help they can even if they don't have the funds to pay for it. With that said, I do have a digital course that's coming out, and that is at allisonkywyman.com/win. There's a wait list for that right now, and that course launches in January 2024. And then I will be rolling out a membership later on in 2024 as well.
Oh, that's awesome. And we'll have that all in the show notes so that people can find you because I think you are serving a very underserved population that really needs support. And they're just kind of silently pulling up by the bootstraps and it's a struggle. So you're really reaching out to those who need it. And I love that energy you bring to everything and that positivity. And I think even just you being vulnerable here and sharing how hard it was that you would be feeling in a place of suicidal ideation, I think that gives people hope because here you are now, fast forward from these really difficult life experiences. They did change you, but they changed you in ways that allowed you to have a deeper level of compassion and empathy and to use your own innate brilliance to be able to pull together the practical pieces too and meet that with the compassion and empathy all together, which is just beautiful to be able to
Oh,
have that all in one place. So
well,
I love
thank you, Kristen. And I do have to say, if there are any former caregivers listening who feel in a dark place, I would just, one, send my love, two, let you know that it's a completely normal place. I also want you to be safe. So I'd love for you to find support, which here really means someone that you trust that you can talk to about what's going on. And three, if it's at all a help, I would want you to know that the life that I'm leading now is beyond my wildest dreams in terms of the joy and the love that exists here and the peace that exists here. So I wish, when I was in my really dark period, that I'd had somebody who's just a former caregiver being like, yeah, that was really tough. But my life is good now. It's not perfect, but it's good. And I really know that yours will be too.
Oh, I love that. That's such a great message. So if you could have a billboard that you'd put up somewhere, but everyone is going to see this billboard, what message do you think the world really needs?
One, I love this question. And two, I would just put up a billboard that says, I love you.
Oh, I love that. I think that is just powerful. The world really just does need love, more love. Like there are songs about it, but it's true. There are
Absolutely.
songs about it.
Absolutely. You know
Absolutely.
what? I feel like that would be a great plot for a Hallmark movie where somebody just goes putting billboards up all around the world. So stay
The,
tuned.
and the I love you connection. I can see like the proposal, in front of the
Yeah.
billboard. Oh yeah. I
Yes.
mean, at the end of the movie, of course, but we get there. And do you have a final thought or anything else you'd want to leave our listeners with?
I would just say that when it comes to things like family caregiving and estate planning, there's normally a lot of shame. People come to me and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I haven't done this yet, or I haven't thought about this yet, or this happened and I should have." And like people just feel really bad. And so if anybody here can relate to that, I just want you to know that you are not behind the bus. You are on the bus now. You have this education, you have this knowledge, and you have time to do something. And so, even if you are caregiving and there are so many things you'd wish you had in place, there's still time right now. We can, or different resources that exist can make your caregiving journey better. It can help you feel more prepared. So if anybody ever feels like somehow they've screwed up, and as a result, everything is going to be either delayed or behind or messed up for the rest of their life. I just want you to know that's not at all true. You're here, you're listening, and there are absolutely things that you can do. It's never too late.
Oh, I think that's beautiful. I have felt some of that feeling of shame for things that we haven't pulled together, things that I feel like I should have thought differently towards my parents, and it's really not helpful or productive. It doesn't help anything to just sit in that feeling of shame. What helps is to actually accept what is and to see where you are and what baby step you can do to move forward. And that is really what makes it for a better journey instead of just being mired in those negative feelings. I think it's normal for us to go there. I think that happens to all of us in our everyday lives. But it's important to be able to stop and say, okay, is this even serving me? Is this even serving the person I'm caregiving? Identify and say, I see you, and let them go and move forward. And I love the
Absolutely.
resources that you have, both the free content that you offer, and I'm pretty sure you do a weekly call too that people can come and then they can benefit from. And then this course just sounds fantastic as being an extra help and also the availability of coaching. So thank you so much, Allison, for the way that you just bless the world.
Oh, thank you for having me. This has been so wonderful.
So it's been fantastic to connect, and I hope people will be able to look you up and really benefit from the wealth of not just knowledge, but of compassion and empathy that you have.
Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you.
Solidarity Sister.